the astronaut who was abandoned in space. Imagine leaving Earth for what should have been a short mission in space, only to find out that your country no longer exists when you try to return. This is the real-life story of the astronaut, who was abandoned in space, stranded, while history erased everything he knew. And the most terrifying part, no one was sure if he'd ever make it back. The forgotten man in orbit. A lone figure floats in the vast emptiness of space. The blue Earth turning silently below. A crackling radio transmission cuts through the silence. Do you copy, Krikalev? Stand by for mission update. A pause. Heavy breathing. Then, in a quiet, exhausted voice, I'm still here. But down on Earth, everything had changed. And no one was coming to bring him home. In May 1991, Sergei Krikalev was launched into space aboard the Mir space station for what was supposed to be a routine 4-month mission. An experienced cosmonaut, he had already spent time on Mir before. This was just another job. But while he floated 400 kilometers above Earth, his home country, the mighty Soviet Union, was falling apart. By August, Moscow was in chaos. A coup attempt threatened to topple the government. Protests filled the streets. Leaders were overthrown. The Soviet Union was on the brink of collapse. Then, the unthinkable happened. You'll have to extend your stay. Mission Control told Krikalev it was temporary, just until things stabilized. But days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. Then came the worst news of all. We can't afford to bring you back. The Soviet Union was gone. The money was gone. And Krikalev was stranded in space, alone, orbiting a country that no longer existed. A ghost in orbit. Months passed. Supplies ran dangerously low. He rationed food, drinking recycled sweat and condensation to survive. His body weakened, his muscles atrophied. His bones thinned, his skin paled from lack of sunlight. He stared down at Earth, watching history unfold beneath him. His city, Leningrad, no longer existed. It was now called St. Petersburg. The rubles in his bank account, worthless. His space agency, crumbling. The world had moved on. But he was still up there, a ghost in orbit. At night, he listened to radio transmissions, but they no longer spoke his language. The Soviet voice he had trained under was gone, replaced by uncertainty. The silence between transmissions grew longer. And then, the hallucinations started. One night, he saw something move past the window. A shadow. But there was no one else on board. His mind was slipping. The desperate return. By now, he had spent 311 days in space. His body could barely function. But finally, a rescue plan was set in motion. The new Russian government scraped together enough funding for a retrieval mission. On March 25, 1992, he boarded the Soyuz capsule and began his descent. The heat shield glowed red-hot, flames licking the edges. The G-forces crushed his weakened body as the capsule plunged through the atmosphere. Then impact. After nearly a year in space, Sergei Krikalev was back on Earth. But the world he returned to was nothing like the one he had left. A man out of time. He collapsed the moment he was pulled from the capsule. His legs too weak to support him. Soldiers had to carry him from the landing site. He had left as a Soviet cosmonaut. He returned as a Russian citizen. His people barely recognized him. He had missed the fall of an empire. The country he had sworn loyalty to was nothing more than a memory. And yet, he didn't quit. Just a few years later, he flew again. And again. He became one of the most experienced astronauts in human history. The man who had been left behind refused to be forgotten. Today, he is remembered as the last citizen of the Soviet Union. But his story is a chilling reminder of something far bigger. What happens when an astronaut goes up and the world disappears beneath them? We may be sending more people into space than ever before. But Krikalev's story proves one terrifying truth. Sometimes there's no one left to bring them home. Like, share, subscribe. If this story shocked you, hit the like button. Share it with someone who loves space mysteries. And subscribe for more untold stories from history. Because sometimes the most unbelievable stories are the ones that actually happened.